Rain hammered the asphalt like 1,000 tiny fists that night. I remember kneeling beside that single floral sneaker, water soaking through my pants, the smell of wet pavement filling my lungs. The shoe sat there under the streetlight, one lace torn clean off, mud smeared across the canvas like someone had dragged it. Beside it, maybe 3 feet away, a phone glowed face up in the gutter. The flashlight app was still on, casting this eerie white beam into the storm drain. My partner, Detective Marcus Webb, stood behind me with his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "No one just leaves like this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I picked up the phone carefully, sliding it into an evidence bag. The screen showed dozens of missed calls from Mom and text messages that got more frantic as the hours passed. The last one, timestamped 2 hours ago. "Lena, please. Just tell me you're okay." Blue lights from 3 patrol cars scattered across the quiet Virginia street, painting everything in flashes of color. Neighbors had started gathering behind the tape we'd just strung up, their faces pale and worried. Someone was crying softly. The whole scene felt wrong, like the world had tilted slightly off its axis. I stood slowly, rain dripping from my hair. "Marcus," I said quietly, "where's the other shoe?" The crowd grew larger as words spread through the neighborhood. I watched Lena's mother, Claire Hartwell, push through the yellow tape before anyone could stop her. She saw the shoe and just collapsed against the nearest patrol car, her legs giving out completely. 2 officers caught her before she hit the ground. "Please," she kept saying over and over. "Someone has to do something. Please." Chief Patterson arrived 20 minutes later in his personal vehicle, a black SUV that seemed too clean for the weather. He didn't rush. He walked slowly through the rain, nodding at a few officers, his face completely blank. When he reached me, he barely glanced at the evidence bags. "Voluntary disappearance," he said, like he was ordering coffee. 22 years old, probably met someone, didn't tell her mother. Happens all the time. I stared at him. "Sir." Her phone and shoe were left in the street. Her car's 3 blocks away with the keys still inside. He waved his hand dismissively. "File the report. But this isn't a priority case, Detective. We've got actual crimes to solve." I watched him walk back to his SUV, watch him drive away without another word. Marcus handed me the missing persons report we'd started filling out. I folded it carefully and watched a patrol officer tuck it into a file box. That file would go into a drawer. That drawer would never be opened again. The rain finally stopped around midnight. I stood alone on that empty street after everyone else had left, staring at the wet pavement where we'd found her belongings. The streetlight above me flickered once, twice, then held steady. Someone had taped a handmade missing persons poster to the light pole already. Lena's face smiled out from the paper, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes bright. I took a photo of that poster with my personal phone. Something in my gut told me I need to remember this moment, this exact feeling of knowing something terrible had happened while being told to look the way. The truth wasn't just missing that night. It was being buried deliberately and completely. I got in my car and sat there for a long time, engine off, watching the street in my rearview mirror. The wind picked up, blowing fallen leaves across the asphalt. One landed exactly where the shoe had been. 3 months earlier, Lena Hartwell had been living the kind of life most 22-year-olds dream about. I learned this from her roommate, Amy Chun, who I interviewed the next morning. We sat in their small apartment, surrounded by Lena's things, textbooks stacked on the coffee table, a nursing student's anatomy poster on the wall, photos of friends taped around the bathroom mirror. She wanted to work in emergency medicine, Amy told me, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. She had this whole plan mapped out. Graduate, get certified, move somewhere she could actually make a difference. Amy showed me photos on her phone. Lena laughing over coffee with friends, sunlight streaming through a cafe window. Lena in her nursing scrubs, exhausted but smiling after a clinical rotation. Lena at a volunteer health fair, kneeling beside an elderly woman, holding her hand. She was the kind of person who saw someone struggling and just helped. Amy said, didn't matter if she knew them or not. She gave money to homeless people, Spent her weekends at free clinics, stayed up all night helping classmates study. That's beautiful, I said carefully. But sometimes she trusted people too easily. Amy finished for me. I know. I told her that 100 times. Amy pulled up Lena's laptop without me even asking. She'd already been through it, searching for answers, trying to understand what happened. The screen glowed in the dim apartment as she clicked through message threads. "This is Mark," she said, pointing to a conversation that went back 6 weeks. "Mark Henderson. He runs some kind of medical volunteer program." I leaned closer, reading the messages. They started professionally enough. Information about volunteer opportunities, links to medical outreach projects in rural Virginia. But as I scrolled, the tone shifted. Mark's messages got longer, more personal. He told Lena she was special, that he'd been looking for someone exactly like her. Someone who understood what it meant to serve. "See how he talks to her?" Amy said, her voice shaking slightly. "It's like he's grooming her or something. Building her up, making her feel chosen." The messages were careful, calculated. Nothing overtly threatening, but every word designed to make Lena feel important, seen, valued. He asked about her dreams, her fears, her relationship with her family. She answered everything openly, honestly. Amy pointed to one particular exchange from 2 weeks ago. "This is what bothered me most. Look, Lena had asked why his camera was always off during their video calls. Mark's response, "I prefer to focus on the work, not appearances. Does that bother you?" Lena had said no, but I could see the hesitation in her follow-up messages. The last message Mark sent came 5 days before Lena disappeared. I photographed the screen with my phone, making sure to capture the timestamp and every word. "There's an outreach project 2 towns over," he'd written. "Small community, desperate for help. I'd like you to come assess the situation with me. Meet me Friday evening. I'll send the address." Lena had hesitated. I could see it in her response time, 3 hours before she replied. "I'm not sure I can make it Friday. Maybe we could do a call first." His response came immediately. "This is time sensitive. These people are counting on us. I thought you understood what commitment means." She agreed within minutes. Amy showed me the last text exchange between her and Lena. Friday afternoon, Lena had sent a photo of her packed bag. "Just one night," she'd written. "Back tomorrow. Don't worry." Amy had responded, "Text me when you get there, and send me the address." Lena never sent that text. Never sent the address. Her phone went dark at 8:47 p.m., according to the cell tower records I'd already requested. Her last known location pinged 3 blocks from her apartment, right where we found her car. She was so excited, Amy whispered. She thought she was going to help people. Claire Hartwell's phone records told a story of mounting panic. I sat with her that afternoon in her living room, going through the timeline minute by minute. She started calling Lena at 9:30 p.m. Friday night. "Just a check-in call," she said, the kind mothers make. Straight to voicemail. She tried again at 10 p.m. voicemail. 10:30, 11 o'clock. Midnight. "I started texting," Claire said, showing me her phone. The messages progressed from casual to concerned to desperate. "Honey, just let me know you got there safely." Then, "Lena, I'm getting worried." Then, "Please answer. Please." By 2 a.m., Claire had driven to Lena's apartment. Amy had been asleep, hadn't heard from her either. They'd started driving the streets together, calling hospitals, checking late-night diners and gas stations. At 6 a.m. Saturday morning, they found Lena's car parked on a residential street 3 blocks from her apartment. The doors were unlocked. The keys sat in the cup holder. Lena's purse was on the passenger seat, wallet and ID still inside. Everything looked normal except for one crucial detail. Lena wasn't there. That's when Claire called the police. That's when the first officer arrived, took a casual look around, and said the words that would haunt me for months. "She's an adult. She probably just needed some space." Claire's voice broke. "What kind of space involves leaving your car unlocked with your purse inside?" The first 24 hours after someone goes missing are critical. Every detective knows this. Every training manual emphasizes it. Every successful recovery depends on fast action, thorough investigation, immediate resource deployment. Lena Hartwell got none of that. I spent Saturday morning arguing with my captain, trying to explain why this case needed immediate attention. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, face skeptical. "She's 22, he said. No history of mental illness. No threats against her. No evidence of foul play. Just a young woman who didn't check in with her mother. Her shoe was in the street," I said. "Her phone. Her car abandoned. Maybe she met someone. Maybe she's embarrassed. Maybe she'll show up tomorrow apologetic and hungover." He waved his hand dismissively. "File it properly and move on. We've got 3 active homicides and a kidnapping with actual evidence." I watched him stamp the missing persons report. Low priority. Meanwhile, Claire and Amy were out there doing the work we should have been doing. They printed 500 flyers themselves, spent their own money at a copy shop. They walked every street in a 2-mile radius, taping Lena's face to light poles and store windows. They organized search parties through social media, got 50 volunteers to comb the woods and back roads with flashlights. I joined them that night, off duty, because I couldn't just sit at home knowing a young woman was out there somewhere, scared or hurt or worse. The witness report came in Sunday afternoon. A man named Thomas Wright called the tip line. He'd seen something Friday night around 8 p.m., but hadn't thought much of it until he saw the missing person flyers. I drove to his house immediately. Thomas was 67, a retired postal worker who spent his evenings walking his dog through the neighborhood. He'd been on his usual route when he saw a young woman matching Lena's description get into a dark SUV. "I remember because she seemed hesitant," he told me, standing in his doorway. The vehicle was parked under the streetlight, and she stood beside it for maybe 30 seconds before getting in, like she was thinking about it. "Did you see the driver?" "Not clearly. Male, I think. The windows were tinted." "Make and model of the SUV?" He shook his head. "I'm not good with cars. Dark colored, newer looking. That's all I got." I wrote everything down carefully, thanked him, and drove straight back to the station. I typed up the witness statement, attached it to Lena's case file, and handed it directly to the detective who'd been assigned, a veteran named Ray Kowalski who was 3 months from retirement. He glanced at it, nodded, and set it on a stack of papers on his desk. "I'll get to it," he said. I watched that paper disappear into the pile. Watched it get buried under phone logs and evidence reports and coffee cup rings. 2 weeks later, I checked on it. Still sitting there, untouched. I couldn't let it go. Something about this case gripped me, wouldn't release its hold. I started working on my own time, nights and weekends, piecing together what everyone else seemed determined to ignore. That's when I found Eva Monroe. Eva was an investigative journalist for a small regional paper, the kind of reporter who actually cared about truth over clicks. I'd worked with her before on a corruption case that ended with 2 city council members in federal prison. When I called her about Lena, she answered on the second ring. "Talk to me," she said. I told her everything. The abandoned shoe and phone. The witness who saw the SUV. The case file gathering dust. The chief's immediate dismissal. The complete lack of investigation. Eva was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It's not just negligence, is it?" "No," I said. "Someone wants this case gone." We met at a diner outside city limits, somewhere we wouldn't be seen together. Eva brought her laptop and a file folder thick with research. She'd been following a thread, she told me, a pattern she'd noticed over the past 3 years. Young women, all volunteers, all disappeared from towns within a 50-mile radius. All cases closed quickly due to insufficient evidence. "How many?" I asked. 7, including Lena. Maybe more. She showed me the files. Different names, different faces, but similar circumstances. Young, idealistic, involved in volunteer work or community service. All vanished without a trace. All investigations that went nowhere. "There's something else," Eva said quietly. She pulled out a folder marked confidential in red letters. "I got this from a source inside the department. Flash drive found in Lena's car during the initial search." My blood went cold. That wasn't in the evidence log. I know. Eva had made a copy of everything on that flash drive. We sat in her car in the diner parking lot, engine running for heat, listening to voice memos Lena had recorded in the weeks before she disappeared. Her voice came through the laptop speakers, soft and hopeful. October 15th. Had another video call with Mark today. He really believes in this work. He says I have a gift for connecting with people, that I can make a real difference in communities that have been overlooked. Another recording, dated a week later. Mark sent me reading materials about medical access in rural areas. It's worse than I thought. Some of these people haven't seen a doctor in years. I want to help. I need to help. Then, dated 3 days before she vanished, he says I'll finally be seen, that this work will show me who I really am. The recordings grew shorter, more uncertain. The last one, recorded Friday afternoon before she disappeared, made my hands shake. I'm nervous about tonight. I don't know why. Mark has been nothing but supportive. But Amy keeps asking questions and Mom seems worried, and I wish I knew more about where we're going. I asked for an address, but he said it's better to meet at the staging area first. Says the community is private, protective of outsiders. The recording cut off abruptly. Then, in the background noise of that last file, barely audible, a man's voice. You don't tell anyone where you're going. This work requires discretion. Eva and I looked at each other in the dim car. That's not part of her memo, she said. That's someone else in the room. Or someone who edited the file, I said. Someone who wanted us to hear it. I needed to talk to Ray Kowalski, the detective who'd let this case die on his desk. He'd retired 2 months after Lena disappeared. Moved to a cabin outside town, supposedly to fish and forget 30 years of cases. When I showed up at his door on a cold November morning, he didn't look surprised to see me. Figured someone would come eventually, he said, lighting a cigarette on his front porch. We sat in weathered chairs, looking out at bare trees and gray sky. Ray smoked in silence for a while before speaking. I tried, he finally said. First week, I followed every lead. Interviewed the roommate, the mother, tracked down that witness who saw the SUV. I even started looking into this Mark Henderson character. What stopped you? He took a long drag, exhaled slowly. Orders came from above. Captain called me into his office, said I was wasting resources on a voluntary missing person. Said to close the file and move on. Did you ask why? I'm 3 months from pension. You learn when to ask questions and when to shut your mouth. Ray stood, disappeared into his cabin, and returned with a sealed manila envelope. His hand shook slightly as he handed it to me. I kept copies. If they knew, they'd fire me. If they know you have this, you're next. Why give it to me? He looked me straight in the eye. Because that girl deserved better. They all did. I opened the envelope in my car. Inside were photographs, police reports, witness statements, all related to the other missing women Eva had mentioned. 7 cases spanning 3 years. Same pattern. Young volunteers, sudden disappearances, investigations shut down within days. And every single case file contained the same name in the initial reports. Mark Henderson, Community Outreach Director. Eva and I spent the next week building a timeline, mapping connections, documenting evidence that should have been documented months ago. We worked in her apartment, covering her walls with photos and string like something from a TV crime show. But this wasn't fiction. These were real women who'd vanished, real families who'd been ignored. The pattern became undeniable. Mark Henderson ran a legitimate nonprofit called Rural Health Access Initiative. On paper, it looked perfect. Tax records clean, board members respected, glowing testimonials from communities they'd served. He recruited volunteers through social media, targeting nursing students, pre-med undergrads, anyone with medical training and a desire to help. But 7 of those volunteers had disappeared. 7 that we knew of. We found volunteer sign-up sheets, applications submitted online through Mark's organization. Eva discovered something I'd missed, the handwriting analysis. 3 different applications, supposedly filled out by 3 different women, contained identical handwriting quirks. Someone had forged at least some of these documents. He's selecting them, Eva said, staring at the wall of evidence. Not recruiting, selecting. The vehicle descriptions matched across multiple witness statements. Dark SUV, tinted windows, newer model. One witness from 2 years ago had gotten a partial plate. Starts with JK, 7. We ran every registration in Virginia matching that pattern. 43 vehicles. 27 were dark SUVs. 1 was registered to Henderson Rural Health Initiative, purchased 18 months ago. The same month the disappearances started. This wasn't random. I whispered. This was systematic. This was a network. Eva corrected. Finding Mark Henderson wasn't hard. His office sat in a renovated building downtown, right between a coffee shop and a law firm. Professional, visible, completely unthreatening. Eva insisted on coming with me. We walked in without an appointment. The receptionist looked up, smiling. "Can I help you?" "We're here to see Mark Henderson," I said, showing my badge. The smile faltered slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to talk to us." Mark appeared in the doorway of his office within minutes, and I understood immediately why people trusted him. Mid-40s, kind face, warm eyes, the kind of person who looked like he genuinely cared. He wore a polo shirt with his organization's logo, khakis, sensible shoes. He could have been anyone's favorite uncle. "Detective," he said, extending his hand. "What can I do for you?" We sat in his office, surrounded by plaques and photos of Mark with community leaders, Mark with volunteers, Mark cutting ribbons at health clinic openings. He listened to my questions with patient concern, nodding at appropriate moments, frowning when I mentioned Lena. "Such a tragedy," he said. "I heard about her disappearance. Terrible thing, but I'm not sure how I can help. You were in contact with her before she vanished." "Was I?" He pulled up his email, scrolled through messages. "Ah, yes. She'd expressed interest in volunteering. We exchanged a few emails. Professional correspondence only. She was supposed to meet you the night she disappeared." His expression never changed. "I'm sorry, detective, but that's not accurate. We never scheduled a meeting. You can check my calendar." He turned his computer screen toward me. His calendar showed no meeting with Lena. No Friday evening appointment at all. "You reporters see monsters everywhere," he said, glancing at Eva. His smile never reached his eyes. "I run a legitimate organization that helps people. I'm sorry about what happened to that young woman, but I had nothing to do with it." Eva published her first article 3 days later. Pattern of disappearances linked to local nonprofit hit the internet like a bomb. She laid out everything. The 7 missing women, the connections to Mark Henderson, the investigations that went nowhere, the evidence that had been ignored or buried. The response was immediate and divided. Half the town erupted in outrage, demanding answers. The other half closed ranks, defending Mark and his organization. I started knocking on doors, trying to find people who'd worked with Mark, who knew his operation, who might have seen something suspicious. Every door closed faster than the last. One woman literally slammed the door in my face. A man threatened to call his lawyer if I didn't leave his property. But on the 4th day, a neighbor finally spoke to me. Elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived on the same street as Mark's office for 20 years. She opened her door, just a crack, chain lock still engaged. "He knows people in the department," she whispered. "Police, city council, mayor's office. His organization donates to their youth programs, sponsors the annual charity auction, funds the police athletic league. How much money are we talking about? Enough that people look the other way when questions come up." "What questions?" She glanced nervously over my shoulder. "Girls that come to his office and don't come back out. Vehicles coming and going late at night. Stuff that doesn't add up for a medical nonprofit. Why hasn't anyone reported this?" Mrs. Patterson looked at me like I was incredibly naive. "Who would they report it to?" "The police chief sits on his board of directors." Eva's second article went deeper. She'd somehow obtained Mark's volunteer sign-up sheets going back 3 years. Every application, every piece of contact information. She cross-referenced them with missing persons reports across Virginia. 11 matches. 11 women who'd signed up to volunteer with Mark's organization and later disappeared. Not all in our jurisdiction, which explained why no one had connected them before. The handwriting analysis showed the same result across multiple applications. Someone had forged signatures, filled out forms for women who'd never actually applied. It created paper trails that didn't exist, documentation of volunteer interest that was fabricated. He was creating evidence, Eva told me over the phone, building alibis. If anyone ever questioned him, he could show these applications and say, "See, she contacted me. She wanted to volunteer." I have no idea what happened to her after that. But Eva found something else in those files, a note scribbled in the margin of one application, in different handwriting, "Approved Jim." The same initials appeared on 6 other applications for women who'd later vanished. "Who's JM?" Eva asked. I didn't know, but I was going to find out. The evidence box from Lena's case went missing that night. I'd scheduled to review it the next morning, planned to go through every item with fresh eyes. When I arrived at the evidence room, the clerk looked confused. "It was signed out last night," she said, checking her log. "By you. I wasn't here last night." She showed me the signature. Someone had forged my name, checked out box 2847 Hartwell, and never returned it. The security footage from the evidence room had been erased. Technical malfunction, the IT department said. Nothing they could do. I stood in that evidence room, understanding with perfect clarity that I was fighting something bigger than one man. This was institutional. This was protected. This was a system closing ranks to protect itself. Claire Hartwell appeared on local news that night. The station had reached out after Eva's articles, wanting the family's perspective. Claire sat in front of the camera, holding Lena's photograph with both hands. "If they won't find her, I will," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "My daughter didn't just disappear. Someone took her. And everyone who's refusing to investigate, everyone who's looking the other way, everyone who's more concerned about protecting reputations than finding the truth, you're all responsible for what happened to her." The broadcast went viral. Local news became national news. CNN picked it up. The story spread across social media. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the missing women of Roanoke, the nonprofit with connections to law enforcement, the investigations that never happened. Public pressure built like a wave. The police department had no choice but to respond. Chief Patterson held a press conference the next day, announcing they were reopening Lena's case and reviewing the others. He looked directly into the camera and promised a thorough investigation. I watched from the back of the room, arms crossed. The same officials who'd buried these cases were now in charge of investigating them. The chief who'd called Lena's disappearance voluntary was now promising justice. That night, someone called the newsroom where Claire had given her interview. The station manager told me about it the next day, male voice, calm and cold, suggesting they drop the story if they value their broadcast license. The station ran another segment anyway. A former police officer contacted Eva in secret. His name was Miguel Reyes, and he'd left the department 6 months earlier after 15 years of service. We met him at a park outside town, somewhere public, but not too crowded. Miguel looked over his shoulder constantly, like he expected someone to be watching. "There was enough to arrest Henderson 3 years ago," he told us. "Young woman named Kara Mitchell, second disappearance. We had witness statements placing her in his vehicle. We had text messages between them. We had evidence of planning, premeditation." "What happened?" I asked. Chief intervened, said we didn't have enough for charges, that it would damage the department's relationship with the nonprofit community, that Henderson's lawyers would destroy us in court. Miguel's jaw clenched. We had enough. We absolutely had enough. Why did the chief protect him? Because too many people owed him. Campaign contributions, donations to police programs, sponsorships for charity events. Henderson's organization funded half the community outreach in this city. Taking him down meant losing all that money, all those connections, all that goodwill. Eva leaned forward. "You have proof of this." Miguel pulled a key from his pocket, small and brass. "Storage unit on Route 7, number 243. Everything's inside. Evidence logs, witness statements, communication between the chief and Henderson's lawyers. I kept copies of everything before I left." "Why didn't you come forward before?" "Because I have a family," Miguel said quietly. "And I watched what happened to people who asked too many questions. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not after reading about Lena Hartwell." Eva and I met Claire Hartwell at the storage unit the next day. We debated whether to include her, but Eva insisted. This is her daughter. She deserves to see the truth. The unit was small, maybe 10 by 10, filled with cardboard boxes labeled with case numbers and dates. Dust floated in the air when we opened the door. The space smelled like old paper and abandonment. Claire stood in the doorway, staring at the boxes. "All of this is evidence. Evidence that was never used," Eva said gently. We started going through the files. 7 cases, 7 boxes, 7 young women whose disappearances had been documented and then deliberately shelved. Witness statements that were never followed up on. Forensic evidence that was never processed. Security footage that was never reviewed. One box contained VHS tapes, video recordings from security cameras near Mark's office. I found a player in the corner, old and dusty, but functional. We plugged it in and started watching. The footage showed Mark's office parking lot, late at night, 3 years ago. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. A dark SUV pulled into the lot. Mark got out, walked around to the back of the vehicle, and opened the rear hatch. Even on the grainy footage, even from that distance, we could see him drag something heavy from the back. Something wrapped in blue tarp. Claire's hand went to her mouth. Eva reached for her, steadying her. The footage continued. Mark disappeared into the building, carrying his burden. 20 minutes later, he emerged empty-handed, got in the SUV, and drove away. Eva ejected the tape carefully. This was never entered into evidence. I checked the log from that box. The tape had been logged initially, marked for review, and then nothing. No follow-up. No investigation. Just filed away and forgotten. The final box contained audio recordings. Cassette tapes from surveillance equipment that had been placed in Mark's office 3 years ago, before the investigation was shut down. Miguel must have made the recordings before they could be destroyed. We listened to hours of nothing. Phone calls about scheduling, meetings about fundraising, normal nonprofit operations. Claire sat with us through all of it, determined to hear everything. Then, on a tape dated 2 years ago, a conversation that made my blood run cold. She trusted me. Mark's voice said, calm and matter of fact. That was her mistake. Another voice, female, laughed. They always do. That's what makes this work. Jennifer Marks is asking questions. JM. Eva whispered. We'd found our initials. Let her ask, the female voice continued. She's part of the system. She knows how this works. And if she pushes, then we remind her who pays her salary, who funds the programs she cares about, who has the power to make her career very difficult. A pause. Mark, you're protected. We've made sure of that. The recording continued, but I'd heard enough. Jennifer Marks, Deputy District Attorney. The same person who would have to prosecute any case we brought against Henderson. The same person who'd been rejecting cases for insufficient evidence for 3 years. Claire was shaking. Eva had gone completely still. They weren't just protecting him, I said. They were part of it. Eva uploaded everything that night. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence from that storage unit went online simultaneously. She posted it to her newspaper's website, to social media, to document sharing platforms, to everywhere she could think of. Within hours, the story exploded. National media picked it up. FBI field offices started receiving calls. The governor's office issued a statement promising a full investigation. The town of Roanoke became the center of a national conversation about corruption, complicity, and the systematic failure to protect vulnerable people. Mark Henderson's office shut down overnight. His nonprofit dissolved. His board of directors resigned. His lawyers stopped returning calls. Chief Patterson submitted his resignation the next morning. Deputy DA Jennifer Marks disappeared, literally vanished, her house empty, her car gone, no forwarding address. 3 other city officials quietly stepped down, claiming family emergencies or health issues. The FBI took over the case. Real investigators, federal resources, people who weren't compromised by local connections. They executed search warrants on Mark's home, his office, his storage facilities. They brought in cadaver dogs, forensic accountants, digital forensic experts. What they found made headlines for weeks. Evidence of human trafficking, financial fraud, falsified documents, bank accounts in 7 different states, property records showing land purchases in remote areas that would require extensive excavation. But Mark Henderson was gone. He'd left the country 2 days before Eva published her exposé, before the evidence went public. Private plane to Mexico, then connections unknown. Interpol issued a warrant, but tracking him became nearly impossible. The courtroom was empty when I sat there 3 months later. Just me and the echoing silence of a justice system that had failed completely. Mark Henderson was gone. Jennifer Marks was gone. The chief had resigned but faced no criminal charges, insufficient evidence of direct wrongdoing, the new DA said. 6 officers were suspended pending investigation. 2 were fired. None went to jail. The families of the missing women filed civil suits against the city, the police department, Mark's defunct organization. They would likely win settlements paid with taxpayer money, while the people actually responsible remained beyond reach. Claire Hartwell sat beside me that day. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The judge had dismissed the criminal case that morning. With Henderson gone and Jennifer Marks unreachable, they had no one to prosecute. The evidence was overwhelming, but you can't try an empty defendant's share. Case closed, the judge had said. Insufficient evidence to proceed. I'd laughed at that. Actually laughed in court. Insufficient evidence. The very words that had been used to bury these cases from the beginning. Eva wrote one final article, Justice Deferred. How the system failed 11 women. It won awards, sparked legislative changes, led to new protocols for missing persons investigations. Cold comfort for families who still didn't know where their daughters were buried. Claire and I stood on the street where we'd found Lena's shoe 6 months earlier. The lamppost still flickered, same irregular pattern. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Quiet houses, trimmed lawns, the illusion of safety. Claire knelt and placed a bouquet of flowers on the curb, right where the shoe had been. White roses, Lena's favorite. They finally heard you, she whispered to her daughter. I made them hear you. Wind picked up, scattering petals across the asphalt. One landed exactly where the phone had been, near the storm drain. Claire watched it, tears streaming down her face. I thought finding the truth would feel different, she said. I thought it would feel like winning. It doesn't, does it? No. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. It feels like losing, just with an explanation. We stood there together as the sun set, watching the streetlight flicker over and over. Somewhere out there, Mark Henderson was living free. Somewhere out there, 11 young women were still missing, their families still waiting for answers that might never come. The investigation had been exposed. The corruption had been revealed. The truth had come to light. But Lena wasn't coming home. I turned in my badge 2 weeks later. Not in protest, not in anger, in exhaustion. I'd spent 6 months fighting a system designed to protect itself. And while we'd exposed the corruption, we hadn't actually changed anything fundamental. The same structures remained. The same incentives existed. The same potential for abuse still lurked beneath the surface of every investigation. Eva continued reporting, but something had changed in her too. Her articles became sharper, angrier, less willing to accept official explanations or bureaucratic delays. She'd seen how easily truth could be buried, and she was determined to be the person who kept digging. The courtroom scene haunted me. That empty bench, that silent gavel, the judge's bored expression as he closed a case that had consumed so many lives. I kept thinking about all the evidence we'd found, boxes of it, hours of recordings, witnesses willing to testify, and how none of it mattered because the people responsible had simply walked away. Exposing the truth didn't bring her back, Eva said when we met for coffee one last time before I left town. But it forced this town to see itself. She was right, but it felt hollow. The town had seen itself, and most people had looked away. I thought about all the small moments that had led to this. The chief deciding the case wasn't a priority. The detective choosing his pension over pursuing leads. The DA protecting her donor. Each individual decision seemed reasonable in isolation. But together, they created a system where young women could vanish, and no one with power would care enough to find them. Night falls on the street where Lena disappeared. I'm leaving town tomorrow, starting over somewhere else, trying to remember why I became a detective in the first place. But tonight, I stand here one last time under the flickering streetlight. The missing persons poster is still taped to the pole, weathered now. Lena's face faded from months of sun and rain. Someone has written at the bottom in permanent marker, "We won't forget, but we will." That's the truth no one wants to admit. The news cycle will move on. The outrage will fade. New scandals will emerge. new tragedies will demand attention. In 5 years, most people won't remember Lena's name. The system that failed her will continue operating, slightly reformed perhaps, but fundamentally unchanged. Because the problem wasn't individual corruption, it was structural incentive. It was the fact that power protects power, that money influences justice, that the vulnerable remain vulnerable because helping them benefits no one with influence. I look down at the pavement where we found her shoe and phone. The rain has washed away any physical trace, but I still see her there, frozen in that moment of trust and hope, getting into a vehicle with someone she believed would help her make a difference. It wasn't just one man who took her life. I whisper to the empty street. It was every person who looked away. The streetlight flickers once more, then holds steady. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wail. Another emergency, another victim, another case that will either be solved or forgotten, depending on who cares enough to fight. I turn and walk away, leaving the flowers and the poster and the flickering light behind. But I carry Lena with me, and all the others like her, a reminder of what happens when justice becomes optional, when truth becomes negotiable, when protecting the system matters more than protecting people. The investigation was buried, but the truth remains, waiting in the dark for someone brave enough to dig. Lena Hartwell's story isn't just about one missing woman or one corrupt system in Virginia. It's about how easily the truth can be buried when the people in power decide it's inconvenient. It's about how many families are still out there, waiting for answers that may never come, fighting systems that were designed to protect them, but instead chose to look away. This case exposed 11 missing women connected to one man, 11 families who deserve better, 11 investigations that should have happened but didn't. And while Mark Henderson may have escaped justice, and while those who protected him faced minimal consequences, their story is now part of the record. It can't be erased. If Lena's story moved you, if it made you angry, if it reminded you why we need to hold those in power accountable, then don't let it end here. Share this story. Talk about it. Remember her name and the names of all those who disappeared. Hit that like button if you believe every missing person deserves a real investigation, not a filed report that gets buried in a drawer. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Do you think the system can be fixed, or does it need to be completely rebuilt? Have you heard of similar cases in your area? Your voice matters, and these discussions keep these stories alive. And please subscribe to this channel. Every subscription helps us continue investigating cases like Lena's, the ones that don't get the attention they deserve, the ones that powerful people would prefer stayed buried. When you subscribe, you're saying that truth matters more than convenience, that victims matter more than reputations. Because the worst thing we can do is forget. The worst thing we can do is let their stories fade into silence. Subscribe, share, and help make sure that never happens. Thank you for watching. And remember, if you see something, say something. Your voice might be the one that makes the difference.